Hey, welcome to the second segment of our Week 2 preview on the Irish NFL show. We've covered the first part of the 6 o'clock slate. We'll cover the later games separately, and indeed the Sunday night and Monday night football games across the four segments of our Week 2 preview. We chop it up into four parts as we do every week. And we continue on with the 6 o'clock games, by looking to the Chiefs at the Jags. Chiefs obviously coming off the back of a reverse to the Lions last week, Colin. They didn't have Travis Kelce, and that made a big difference. Also, not having Chris Jones on the field, of course, due to his hold in during the off season. That all seems to be resolved. Is this the week where the Chiefs get it back on track?
The Chris Jones comments were interesting. He said he would do it differently if he had his time again, and that's almost always seems to be the way in terms of these kind of holdouts. Ultimately, when the player kind of doesn't get what they wanted, and even though he'll make the money back, he didn't get a whole lot else on top of that, but he is back, and that will change it. It means that they don't have to blitz. They can get pressure in different ways when he comes in. But this one, you were wondering what I was going to compare it to. This is Das Boot. This is just kind of two devastatingly intelligent coaches going up against one another who know each other well. And Andy Reid borrowed from Dougie P in the Super Bowl win last year. We've seen Dougie borrow from Andy in the past as well. I think this could be a fascinating matchup, and I think the Jags are capable of doing it. I really do. The Chief, like, how fit is Kelce? That, I suppose, is the big question, and I know they'll want to risk him because there's nobody like him. There's nobody like him in the league. Like, he's not just a tight end; he is their best receiver for the Chiefs, and he is the absolute safety blanket for Patrick Mahomes. And you saw Mahomes last week. It wasn't just the drops; it was at times he had to take that split second longer to even decide what exactly he was going to do. Whereas he always knows Kelce is there. I think if this was in Arrowhead, I would say that the Chiefs should get back on track. But I may as well swing for the fences and say that it's going to take a little bit longer for the Chiefs. I'm going to say that the Chiefs and the Bengals are both starting 0-2, and they're both chasing Dougie P and Trevor Lawrence in the race for the AFC.
All right, Brian. On the Jags side, plus column, they went on the road last week. They got that win against the Colts. Nice to see the connection between Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley. That seems to be clicking already. On the negative side, they really had their hands full against a flawed Colts team with a rookie quarterback that has a lot of gaps and will probably have been very happy with how they played. Are they going to make enough progress to knock off the Chiefs and send the Chiefs to 0-2?
Oh, it's a tricky one. It's genuine. This is one I'm torn over. I'm still torn over. I think this is going to be a split last second decision. And I think I know where I'm going, but I do look at offensively. Like, Calvin Ridley's made a huge difference. I know it's only one game, but you can see exactly why they were keen to get him in after the ban, how explosive he can be. And I was just reflecting on last Thursday's game. The Chiefs struggled defensively to cover. And I know, like, it starts up front, they didn't get the pressure on Goff throughout the course of the game like they probably would now, and they may do it this weekend with Chris Jones coming back in. But Brown got opportunities, the tight end Laporta got opportunities. The run game with Gibbs and Montgomery was really effective. And then you look at the players, like Ridley, as I said, there's other great players. Cork with the Jags, at the end, the running back. They've got all these players that can essentially do the similar type of damage for me in this game. Well, Kelce coming back is a factor. And even if he's not 100%, he plays. He's still a factor on the field. They still have to manage him. Potentially putting two players on him if he is productive enough. Like, even 60-70% fit Kelce is probably arguably still better than majority of the tight ends in the league in terms of how you have to scheme against them. And I think it's hard to see, like, how many times has Doug Peterson actually got him beaten Andy Reid when they played these, coach to coach. I don't think it's been very often. I think this will be a tough spot for the Jags. I think the Chiefs, I'd also factor in he's had 10 days to scheme for this game. So Doug Peterson coming off the game on Monday would have turned his attention to this game Friday of last week. So he's had a long time to get ready for this one. He'll be licking his chops at this on the back of a very tough loss. So for me, I'm not full of confidence on it, but I will side with the Chiefs. I think it'll be a high-scoring game, and I think the Chiefs come out the right side of it.
Yeah, like you, I was torn on this one, I have to say. And it really does come down to what you're saying there. I think it exactly depends on the percentage fitness to Travis Kelce. I mean, bearing in mind, he was banged up going into the Super Bowl last year. He was banged up in the playoffs, had serious problems with his back. There was actually a question as to whether or not he was going to play in the Super Bowl. So we know Kelce can play hurt. I think 70% Kelce is probably more than enough to help restart the sputtering offense we saw last week. I think the Jags were probably, though, closer to what I expected from the Jags than the Chiefs were, closer to what you expect from the Chiefs. And I worry slightly about what we get from Kansas City, but I think I'm going to go with the Andy Reid form book on that one, and ultimately I'm going to slightly favour the Chiefs. I'm going to call Chiefs to come out on top there, for better or for worse. It's Chargers Titans next, column, and Chargers came out the wrong side of the week one shootout. Titans obviously went down as well. Disappointing defeat for them. Which of these two comes up out of the battle of the 0-1 teams?
I see Brian rubbing his hands, looking forward to discussing the Chargers and Staley. Connor, this is Dr. Strangelove, or the alternative title to Dr. Strangelove, How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, because that is a fantastic movie that makes absolutely, no sense at times, has some wonderful lines. Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room, and others. Hugely entertaining, baffling. All things that both the Chargers and the Titans are. Variable is endlessly entertaining. Justin Herbert is a fantastic quarterback, but ultimately it all ends in destruction, just like Dr. Strangelove. And I mean, for the Chargers, like, they were so good on the ground last week, but they ran into an absolute buzzsaw in terms of a Dolphins offense that was just brilliant, and they couldn't get it done. I have huge concerns about the Titans. I don't know what they're trying to do. Ryan Tannehill looks all out of sorts ever since that playoff game where he literally threw it away and kind of talked about the fact that how that has impacted on him. He's never looked the same. He seems absolutely devoid of confidence. The Titans will keep this close, but I have the Chargers and Brandon Staley getting back to 500 after this.
Brian, is Mike Vrabel the Stanley Kubrick that masterminds this one with his obsessive focus on detail? Is that going to be enough to take the Chargers down?
I'm just writing down the amount of films here that I know I've heard of that Colin keeps referring to. So far, I'm at 0. Now I might get to 1 by the end of the night. So I assume that's another one you've thrown in there. Sorry, it's not my gig. I'm on the wrong show tonight. Mike Vrabel, for me, will find a way to navigate a victory in this game, because the one thing we do know, despite, and I fully agree with Colin, despite the poor play of Ryan Tannehill, it was evident last week with 3 interceptions, and they lost the game 16-15 despite that. Against the Saints team that, let's be fair, weren't there to be had last weekend. And if it had been for better quarterback play, he would have won that game. I'm not necessarily saying we'll see a rebound from Tannehill. Like, I mean, it doesn't make any sense, does it? Like, you look at the Chargers, and I might be critical of them. They still played a really great game last weekend. They put up 34 points and came out the wrong side of a defeat. You would think they'll go in there and lights out again this week, but I think sometimes with the Titans at home and their defense looking a lot better last weekend, and I kind of suggested that in the lead up to the season, that if the front seven could get back to what we saw 2 years ago, they'll keep them in games, and that was the case last weekend. Like, they stayed in the game that they probably felt people probably felt they should have been out of, and it took a drive at the end for the Saints to put the game away. Now I'm going to side with Titans here. I think this is an upset. It's an upset collection. I'm not entirely sure it is, but I think, and it's more the coaching. You're asking me which coach I trust to navigate a victory in tough times when both teams are winners. Titans are at home. They'll have the crowd up for it. Derrick Henry only had 63 yards last week. I expect he can do better against this Chargers defense, and probably he's the one that brings them the joys on the run game in terms of putting them over the line to get this victory. So for me, it's Titans' victory this weekend.
Yeah, I'd agree with that up to a point. I think in this one, all the talent is on one side of the equation. I think all the brains and all the coaching skill is on the other side. I know you can say sometimes plays win games, sometimes players win games. I think Chargers were just about outgunned last week, but by a team that have even more talent, in my view, than they do. I don't think that's the case with the Titans. That doesn't mean that Vrabel doesn't have a plan. That doesn't mean Vrabel doesn't have them ready to go hard. That doesn't mean that the Titans defense isn't going to have something up its sleeve to try and contain what we saw from the Chargers last week. I think ultimately, the Chargers will want to take a leaf from Vrabel's mentor Bill Belichick's book and don't beat yourselves, which they kind of did last week, and which is kind of their unofficial mantra as a franchise, unfortunately. But I think they've got just enough to get past the Titans this week. I think it will ultimately tell they'll find a way to get it done, even though they are on the road. And I did hesitate a little bit over this one. Raiders Bills, Brian, first to you on this one. Bills looking to right the wrongs of Monday Night Football. We talked about the Aaron Rodgers side of the equation, obviously, at length from a Bills perspective. Massively disappointing for them. If you were to hand them a situation where Rodgers goes down after 4 snaps, they would fully expect to win that game. Frankly, they'd probably fully expect, given the confidence that they have in their regular season performances over the past 2 years, to be going out and winning in MetLife Stadium one way or the other. That didn't happen. They're under a bit of pressure now. Raiders, on the other hand, came off a week 1 win. Garoppolo does what Garoppolo does, shows you just enough, does one stupid thing. Is that going to be enough to get over the Bills?
No, unfortunately not. I think we saw Raiders lay down. Like the Raiders-Broncos game, having looked back at the highlights again, wasn't really a game that you'll put back in your week 1 of games you'll ever want to kind of go back on. The Raiders defense played quite well in the second half. They held the Broncos to 3 points. But for me, that game was more so around the Broncos inept to get over the line, and they found ways to throw a game away that they should have won. Really should have won. And we've seen Garoppolo last week, as well as he played at times. We saw the traits were still there. When he's under pressure, under duress, he does silly things like that interception in the red zone. And if ever there's a team that needs a point to prove going into the second week of the season, you're right. I mean, the Bills should have won that game last weekend. We all selected them, thinking Aaron Rodgers was going to be fully fit for the entirety of the game, and we still thought the Bills would win. They gave it away. It's a huge disappointment, but I think this is a nice bounce back for them. I mean, with all due respect, it's a great win for the Raiders to get off the slide because everybody has little hope for them this season. But can they go into Buffalo and win? Can they keep it close? Like the line reflection of a betting firm, doesn't see it that way. It's 9.5 points. It's the biggest spread at the weekend. Everybody's expecting the Bills to win by 10 plus. I buy into it unless Josh Jacobs can come out and have an even better game, which he had last weekend, and none this team to victory. I don't see it. For me, it's a Bills win all day long.
Yeah, same for me. I got to say, I'm not going to add too much to that. This is what the Bills do. They win these games all day long. Jets have a lot more to offer than the Raiders do, even without Aaron Rodgers. And when the Bills have a point to prove, they generally prove it. I think back to that game a couple of years ago where everybody was questioning Sean McDermott, saying Bill Belichick had his number and he'd psyched him out. And they went out and took care of business against him in a big way in the playoffs when it was put up to him. Colm, different result for you. Can you see last week's conquerors of the Broncos, the Raiders, getting it done? Or like us, do you think the Bills just have way too much to put to them?
I think that the Bills will have enough in terms of pass rush. The Broncos were awful last week, despite being amongst the top blitz-heavy teams in the league. They were worst in terms of actually getting pressure, which should tell you everything you need to know about a Broncos defense. Look, this to me it's not Saving Private Ryan, it's Saving Private Allen. He has got to figure it out. He was awful. He was subjectively awful, objectively awful, horrifically awful. It should be a nadir for him. They need to pull him aside. They need to say, and I know, Connor, you said the other day, you can't take the Josh Allen out of Josh Allen. Well, the speaker, doesn't go to 11. Right. And he needs to realize that is the issue. And I'm hoping that he does learn from it. And I do think that they will have enough to beat the Raiders.
Connor, can I just jump in with a quick point? Sorry, he's on mute there.
I'm muted. Sorry, I was just explaining, Brian. That's a Spinal Tap reference in case that.
Oh no, I knew that one.
We're not taking your movie knowledge for granted.
No, I knew that one. I did know that one. Can't say I really enjoyed it, but I knew that one. Just want to make one quick point in Josh Allen. there is a risk that he goes into this game this weekend and they may win, they may get over the line, and they won't win as comprehensive as people think. But the pressure builds on him because everybody's expecting the economists select him as MVP, and I mean for very good reasons. Like, he's been fantastic over the course of the last years. But we have seen over the last year, in particular, I think the Bengals playoff game, when he scored a touchdown, how aggressive and argumentative he was with players on the Bengals side, and obviously kind of transported him and Diggs had a right ding dong at the end. I wonder, even if they don't get a really confident, for me, he has to come out this weekend, lights out type of stuff, for these conversations to go away around how he's playing. They got to put up 30 odd on this Raiders team and put them to bed. If they struggle over the line, I just think, bear in mind how the game finished last week, I think the pressure's still there from going into week 3.
When we come back to you for Seahawks Lions, week 1 changes everything, of course. When all the talk is done after the off season, Lions were facing a tough start. We were saying they had to go Chiefs in week 1, Seahawks week 2. The way everybody was lining this one up, it could easily put the Lions in a 2-0 hole, favored as they are to win the NFC North. Instead, they're coming off the back of a huge morale boost and statement win. Seahawks, on the other hand, went down slightly surprisingly, albeit against a divisional rival, against the Rams. Do you see the Lions going to 2-0 here and cementing their status as the favourites to win the North and get to the playoffs?
Sometimes when a team has a great win in week 1 and you think this is it now, they're on, people are high on them anyway and they're on the right track, and then they find a way to give a game away. I don't see that. I really don't think. I think the Lions are going to win this game. I was looking at Pete Carroll's success rate after a loss. He's 60%. But they potentially are missing 2 offensive line guys again. Like the 2 guys who we spoke very highly of in terms of the performance last year, Charles Cross and Abe Lucas. They both went off injured last weekend. It doesn't look like either are going to play. And the Lions, for all the pressure they got in Mahomes last week, they didn't have a sack on him. They never sacked him once. I'd imagine that's going to change on Sunday. I think Gino's in for a tough day. I think we could be talking about the Lions' defense being the winner coming out of this game, as opposed to the offense last week in week 1. They got it done a different way. They win it defensively. For me, it's a Lions victory on Sunday.
Colin, the knock on the Seahawks last year as the season went on was people were kind of surprised because they hadn't seen as much of Gino. They hadn't seen Gino play at this level. Once they started getting a beat on him, the Seahawks were finding it much tougher to get wins. With the off-season now gone and people haven't had lots of chance to look at the tape, there's a big difference between going into the season as a surprise package as the Seahawks did last year and going into the season with the burden of expectation and with the burden of defensive coordinators and offensive coordinators around the league pulling apart everything you've done and looking for a way to undermine it. Is it 2-0 for the Lions for you, or did the Seahawks bounce back?
I see what you're saying, and I think there's an element a little bit to that kind of, but ultimately this is about the fact that the tackles are out, and the interior of the O-line was a problem last year. And when your tackles are out, that becomes an even bigger problem. So this isn't Black Hawk down, this is Seahawk down. And ultimately, I have my 2 teams that I predicted to go to the Super Bowl starting the season 0-2, because the Lions, I think, will have too much in terms of their pass rush, and they'll have too much in terms of just their ability to score points. It's a long season. I think that the Seahawks will right the ship, but I think when you lose 2 tackles, it makes it incredibly difficult, for Gino. I think it'll be close though. I think Pete Carroll will want to get a response, but I just think losing the 2 tackles, even if you're bringing in Jason Peters, he's 41, and it's going to take a little bit of time.
Yeah, I got to say, this is not a game I want if I'm the Seahawks in week 2. This is by no means a get-right game. I thought that Lions offensive line was virtually pristine, kept Jared Goff as clean as you'd want him to, let him do what he wanted to do. I think defensively they'll have plenty to throw at Gino and that Seahawks offense as well. They're on this massive winning streak, of course, stretching back to last season. They're really rolling, and I don't see the Seahawks putting a stop to that. I think they're going to go to 2-0, and I do see them atop the NFC North both now and indeed at the end of the season. Right, that is part 2 of our week 2 preview in the books. For our podcast listeners, we're breaking it up over 4 segments as we always do. We got the 2 6:00 games, we got the later games, and then we got the Sunday and Monday night games all across separate previews this week.